Hello, everyone. Welcome. Today, I'm going to be giving you a recap of XDC 2019. So, as you're probably aware, it took place in Miami, Florida, and just a couple weeks ago, actually. I was at the Marriott Biscayne Bay, where the temperature the entire week we were there was right around 83 degrees. I was told it was a little cool for Miami this time of the year, but certainly plenty warm for my tastes, although we were often inside for most of the day, in this lovely hotel, which you can see here, the Marriott, and is right on the water, overlooking a dock with lots of boats. And the conference was actually on the third floor of that hotel, so you can see up from the bottom. It's the part that is a little bigger than the hotel proper. So, day zero, since we're now doing zero-based indexing, was the meet and greet of the conference. This was Tuesday, and it started with check-in at 7 p.m. when the registration desk opened, where you could check in, get your T-shirt, get your badge, and then meet the other people that are there, Xojo staff, et cetera, et cetera. Lots of people that have been to XDC have been in the past, so there were people that were saying hi to people they've seen in past years, and there were lots of new people as well, so that we're getting to meet other Xojo developers. And that day zero meet and greet lasted pretty late. The registration desk was actually pretty close to the hotel bar, so there was a lot of people hanging out and enjoying others' company. Day one, the next day, Wednesday morning, was the first day of the conference, and it was a pretty busy day. Started with Jeff's keynote, and then Ed Lindu did a very short talk on how he's using Xojo in education at the college where he teaches at, and how they've replaced their introduction to programming course from using Java to they switched to using Xojo, and were able to get the pass rate on the course essentially up to 100% when it was really very low. It was well below 50%. And this has been super important to get people to stay in their information technology program. Then we had lots of sessions. These were full sessions for everyone to attend. The next days have split sessions, so you can choose which session you want to go to. We started with Android, which was presented by Travis and myself. And then we had Web Framework 2.0, which Greg talked about. And then we broke for lunch. And then after lunch, we had a couple panels. Started with a technology panel facilitated by Jeff with a variety of people taking pre-submitted questions to talk about technology and where its general direction might be headed. And after that, we followed up with the Ask the Engineers panel, where we also took some pre-submitted questions and then took questions from the audience. And then Carol Keeney of Bikini Software gave a great talk on database topics for programmers that helped explain good ways to set up your database and how you can use them in your apps. And then we wrapped up the sessions for the day with a session on the new API 2.0 features that was done by, again, myself and Travis. And for the evening activity on the first day, we actually had a dinner cruise out in the waters outside Miami and Miami Beach. So a little bit about some of the things that we talked about on the first day. The first is Android. Travis gave an actual live demo of what we have right now. I got a few screenshots here I can share with you. So you can see the project chooser now has, in addition to all the other project types that exist today, there's an option to create Android apps. And the layout editor for Android looks very similar to iOS, slightly different Chrome around the layout area itself, but otherwise pretty similar. You can see on the right-hand side the list of controls that we have available. And again, many of these are very similar to what's available in iOS, although these are all Android specific, of course. In addition, the debugging settings for Android lets you choose from available Android emulators that you have installed. And a nice cool feature that Android has readily available is you can actually debug directly to a plugged-in USB device. So if you have an Android phone, you can actually just plug that into your computer using USB, enable debug mode on the device, and you can run right from Xojo onto the device. This is what a layout can look like. Works, again, similar to how other project types work. You just drag and drop stuff onto the layout editor, position things how you want. You can see the properties for the selected table. Right now, this is the mobile table. And you can see it has a few properties with some of the new naming standards that I'll touch on when we get to API 2.0. And you can specify some initial values to show in the layout editor for a preview. And this is what that particular app looks like if you just run it as is in the Android emulator. And then with a little bit more tweaking, this is what it actually looks like running on an Android phone. That's just a screenshot right from the phone itself. So a lot of good stuff coming along on Android. Now let's talk a little bit about Web 2.0. Greg gave this session here. And he started by showing you the Xojo IDE with a layout that has some of the new controls on it. So you can see how some of these differ from what is there currently. And then this is that project running in a web browser, which he ran. And you can see how they look when actually displayed in the web browser, very similar to the layout. And a few other controls here. It's showing a dialog. And again, looks a little different. And in the background, you can see a new control, the tab panel control. That's available in Web 2.0. Another new control is the charting control that Greg showed. And this was interactive with some nice animations as the chart moved to match the values. And if you hovered over the various points on the chart, you get a tooltip describing the data behind it. And this here is a feature that Greg showed. This is a little snippet of the Xojo IDE. But what you can do in Web 2.0 is you can drag a theme, a bootstrap theme. That's a web framework. And you can just drag that into the project. And the IDE will recognize it and apply that theme to your layouts automatically. And then update everything for you. So he just dragged a particular bootstrap theme, and the layout editor immediately used it and updated all the controls on it. And one of the last things Greg showed is something we're working on to test our Web 2.0 framework, and we're building a web version of Feedback. So here you can see the initial screen of the web version of Feedback with a toolbar at the top and the two main actions here. And then there's the ability to create new cases. And you can search and look at cases and click on them to open them and that sort of thing. And this also, Greg was able to demonstrate, it uses the new capabilities of the list box, which is what you see here. But the list box now loads data dynamically, which makes it much more responsive for web apps. So it'll initially load, I forget the exact number, it's like 50 or 100 rows. And then as you scroll through, more rows are loaded in the background automatically, and the scroll bar adjusts and all that good stuff. So again, quite a bit to show for Web 2.0. And then the other big thing we talked about was API 2.0. And essentially, what we told everyone is that a large portion of API 2.0 will be rolled out soon. We had thought we might initially be rolling this out in kind of smaller pieces in each release, but progress on this moved a little more quickly than we anticipated. So there'll be a big portion of this will be rolling out pretty soon. And when this actually happens, you're going to see that many existing things in the Xojo framework are going to be marked as deprecated. It's more of an FYI, but there's nothing to really worry about here because we're not removing anything that's in the Xojo framework. Everything is going to remain as is. There's just going to be lots of new stuff that you'll be able to take advantage of. So we're keeping everything so that your code remains compatible. So you can still use your projects, still work on stuff, and then you can switch to API 2.0 as you need to. However, we will stop using the older properties, method events, that sort of thing, in any docs, code samples, and example projects. So we're going to be updating those to use the newer API 2.0 items instead. We do want to encourage people to be using that, and a good way to do that is to have all the sample code refer and use it. So here's a few little snippets of some code and how it might differ. So this is some database code sample, database code that you might write today. So you can see it's getting a database file. It's assigning it to a SQLite database in this particular case, and then connecting to it. So you can see what that looks like. In API 2.0, there's only a couple subtle differences. One of the first things you might notice on this first line is it doesn't say dim, it says var. We are adding the var keyword as a synonym for dim. So you can use that in place of dim. But otherwise, the command is the same. Assigning the folder item to the database file is also the same. And the connect method, though, doesn't return a value anymore. It raises an exception if there is a problem connecting. So you can catch that exception and then do as you were doing before and display a message with the message that caused the exception. So the code, again, looks very similar, but this is demonstrating one of the bigger changes for API 2.0 is we're using exceptions for things that are more error related rather than a mixture of exceptions and error codes. And the big reason for that is that error codes are often ignored, which results in problems in the code that people don't become aware of. Here's another snippet of database code. This is using a prepared statement. So you can see this is code and how it might look today. Have your prepared statement, you got to bind the types and the value, and then you get it into a record set. In API 2.0, again, it looks very similar. Record set is now row set. However, we're moving to rows and columns instead of records and fields, which are older terms. The prepared statement can be just passed in directly as part of the SQL select call so that you don't have to do all that other initial setup. And it does, again, make use of exceptions to catch any errors. And sometimes some of the changes in API 2.0 are going to be, largely just naming changes to make things a little more consistent and clearer. So here you can see some list box code that you might write today. It's just setting up a list box with some headers and then some values. And the code in API 2.0, largely the same, just with some different names for some of these properties and methods. The API 2.0 video in its entirety is available for free on YouTube as kind of a preview for the XDC session. So if you go to our YouTube channel, that's Xojo, you can find it there. And you might also want to, while you're there, if you haven't already, subscribe to the YouTube channel so you get notified whenever new videos are posted. Day 2 is when we split the rooms into 2, and we have more sessions with lots of sessions presented by attendees. So I'll just rattle off a big list of some of the sessions here. There's a session about Microsoft Windows and debugging, and a session on text encodings, using Xojo Web, creating your own custom autocomplete search field, communicating with Xojo Cloud, I think this is like the 6th week in a row where Keynote freezes on me in the middle. They had an update this week too. I really thought it might have cleared this up. Source control is another popular session. The Monkey Bread plugins. Common mistakes that people make. How to distribute your apps using Xcode. This is a great session. It showed some tips for how you can actually do all your development and build your apps using Xojo, but then send the build app off to Xcode so it can do all the proper packaging, code signing, and notarizing and all that stuff for you to distribute your app. There were a couple sessions on how to use Xojo script in your applications. And then webhooks was another neat session that was very useful for web app developers. And one of the final sessions was on mock objects, and that's a testing related thing where you have essentially fake objects that you can use in testing to replace real stuff so that you can test stuff without necessarily real live data. Day 3 also started with lots of sessions. So there was an optimization session that I did in the morning. And then a super popular session. This one was probably voted the best overall session by attendees I spoke with. This was the Xojo and Artificial Intelligence session by Jim Meyer. And he did some great demos that showed how to make calls into Google and Amazon's recognition system, so you could send pictures up to it and it would come back and tell you what was actually in the picture, for example. And he had some code for how to interface with those APIs and all that stuff, so very neat. There's a session on Roo, which is a programming language made entirely with Xojo itself that you can actually use in your Xojo apps. Continuous integration is a build process. How to make your own picture grid. A session on using plug-and-play microcontrollers with Xojo. How to use Apache Velocity to simplify creation of database apps. How to improve in-app payments for your Xojo apps. More about Linux. And rapid database development. Dealing with business challenges and helping to keep your customers happy. And that is when we reach the end of XDC. So I thought I would also wrap up here by showing a few photos of some various things. One thing we do at the beginning of XDC every year is the Xojo team meets for a couple of days of meetings, and then we have a little team activity. And this time we went to a wildlife refuge and got to see lots of animals and actually go into kind of a sitting/petting room where we got to hang out with animals. One of them was an owl, this fun-looking owl with the big yellow eyes. You'll recognize this owl if you do go to the forum and see my updated profile picture as the owl. I took a selfie with the owl that I'm now using as my profile picture. This is the Marriott's event board where you can see the Xojo conference listed on there. Typical breakfast buffet here for the early birds that are up before the sessions actually start. getting in line to get their breakfast. This is the first day before the main keynote where people are gathering. And the keynote begins with Jeff. Here you can see Jeremy Leroy winning a Xojo Design Award for his Ski Maps iOS app. We didn't have a separate session on this, but this is something Jeff talked about in the keynote, and this is something called interops. And here he was showing an example of quite a bit of declare code that you might have to write if you wanted to access iOS calendar-related stuff. And you can see there's quite a bit of code there. And then he showed what the code looks like when you use the Xojo interops. And this is actual code that is in the Xojo's iOS XDC app. And you can see how much simpler the code is, because you don't have to do a lot of that declare setup with mapping everything to the methods and converting the data types and that sort of thing. And the other cool thing he showed is that this is right from the code editor, and the interops autocomplete for you. So you can even save a little time by using autocomplete to help guide you instead of having to peruse the extensive Apple documentation. So we're really excited about interops. Here is a shot of Greg in the middle of his Web 2.0 session. And he's highlighting some of the new features in particular to the Web 2.0 list box, which have a lot of stuff that it doesn't currently have today. And it's a live shot of the feedback app that he demonstrated. After lunch, we had panel discussions. Here is Jeff with Paul Levine and Philippe Casgrain, Reinhard Blumauer, and Tim Dietrich, talking about technology. And then after that, the engineers panel, that's Greg, Travis, William, and me in the picture here, taking and answering questions. And from the dinner cruise, had a great view of the Miami skyline. It's a shot of me in one of my sessions. Actually, I think a customer took this. Both of my sessions kind of revolved around this concept here of make it work, make it right, make it fast. And in this case, make it fast was about the optimization session, and make it work and make it right were how to use the debugger to get to the point where your code is working well enough that you can think about optimizing it. And this here is the full XDC session schedule. And there's your recap of XDC 2019 for those of you that weren't able to make it. And if you are interested in seeing everything from XDC, you can purchase the videos from all the sessions from the Xojo store. They are all available today, actually. They went up on, I think, Friday of last week. So all the sessions I mentioned here have corresponding videos that you can watch. It's well over, it's in the 30s. I don't remember the exact number, but quite a few sessions, including, as I mentioned earlier, the free API 2.0 one that is on YouTube. All right, well, I think I'll wrap things up here. I want to thank everyone for watching. Of course, if you have questions at a later time, you can always shoot me an email, paul@xojo.com. Have a great day.